Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so excited to have you join us today. We dedicate this podcast to exploring the idea of doing business with a servant's heart in your life and your business. Truly make a difference doing that and make an impact with people around you. We also created this podcast to inspire you, motivate you, and educate you so you could take that into the world, your world, and make a difference. And while you're listening to my incredible guest today, he's a young 82, but he's going to teach you a lot. He's going to really motivate you. I lost my notes here. Here we go. I want you to think about how you're going to serve today, yourself, and you're going to serve others. And with that, what impact you're going to create today. And the key word is today. Your call to action is do it today. Let's make a difference today. Now, I want to thank my sponsor, Pantheon Alliance. Would you like to be part of an exclusive community of high-income and successful business owners and entrepreneurs from very diverse industries? Together, they are building a thought leader platform to impact and change the world. And impact and change is going to come from a young man today who has done a lot, has an incredible story we're going to start with, but just really gets the servant's heart and how to be a servant. John, I want to welcome you to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Love to start with your story. You almost died on a cruise ship.
Oh, you want to start with that story?
It's impactful.
Yeah, I know it is. Well, the story is that I was in the Foreign Service for a long time and finally left because I realized I could not do what I wanted to do with my life and work for anybody else. So I started naively thinking that I was in New York City then, that I could give wonderful speeches and that people would pay a lot of money for them and I would support myself that way. That didn't seem to work very well. But then a friend told me, hey, heck, you can get a job lecturing on cruise ships. And since I had a lot of stories to tell from the Foreign Service or from my mountaineering climbs, I said, okay, fine. And I got a job on this cruise ship that was going from Vancouver to the Far East, and my only job was to give a couple of speeches on U.S. foreign policy. I didn't really care what I gave the speeches on. I was just there as the lecturer, and not only that, but I learned very quickly that part of my job was to look good in a tuxedo because cruise ships had a lot of blue-haired widows around, so I was dancing them around the dance floor. That was part of the job. So it was interesting. Now, mind you, at that point in my life, there had been a significant shift. I'm sure we'll get into this, but my whole first half of my life was I was in wars and revolutions, either starting them or stopping them, and I'd faced death at least a dozen times, and I thought I was invulnerable. And the whole thing, my whole life was about adrenaline rush, and it was a very shallow life. And I finally began to turn that around and live a better life after a battle in Vietnam taught me some severe lessons. Anyway, I ended up at the United Nations where I was actually able to do some good stuff, like I helped end apartheid, for example, in South Africa, something I'm quite proud of.
Yeah.
But in any case, I left the Foreign Service looking to make some money off my gift of gab. Ended up on a cruise ship. So there we are. I can take one person with me. I took my then 13-year-old daughter, Mallory. We shipped out from Vancouver. 3 days after leaving Vancouver, we're up in the North Pacific off the Alaskan coast heading for Japan or Indonesia or Singapore or wherever we were headed for. And and all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, the ship catches fire. There's a fire in the engine room, and they wake us up, but they don't tell us the truth. They say it's a minor fire, and there's no problem. But would we please all the passengers all come up to the ship's lounge, where they'll serve free drinks while they use fans to clear the smoke out of the ship, and there's no reason to worry, etc., etc. So my daughter, Mallory, and I are completely disarmed, as is everybody else, by this false news. We go up to the lounge, it's full of smoke. So with all the other passengers, we go out on deck. Now, this is in October in the Gulf of Alaska, so it's like cold. It's like winter coming on. And so people disarmed by the message don't have warm clothes on, so they pull down curtains and use tablecloths, whatever, just trying to stay warm. But the key thing is, any fool could look around and see that the smoke coming up the stairwells is getting blacker and thicker. So obviously they've lied to us. Obviously there's the fire isn't out, but it seems to be growing. So people are beginning to, like get a little worried. So we're out there for, for an hour or so, and then they ask us all to come to the rear, the stern of the ship, the fantail. Where they serve more free drinks, and now all of a sudden there are a lot of people in firefighting gear. A helicopter comes over and lowers a bunch of firefighting canisters onto the deck, and the firemen disappear into the ship's interior trying to put the fire out. But now the smoke is coming up around the sides of the ship, and even on the back of the ship, the stern, you could see the smoke coming up from the side of the ship. So people are getting really scared. You'll love this. At that point, they pull out the ship's orchestra and set up the ship's orchestra out there at the stern of the ship. And it's not, I know everyone's thinking of the Titanic. Well, it was, believe me, it was kind of like that.
Yeah.
And only the orchestra was not playing Near My God to Thee, but show tunes from Oklahoma. But in any case, we're there at the fantail, and the captain comes out and says, I'm sorry, but we look like we've lost the battle with the flames, so I want you all to go to your lifeboat stations. Oh, now people are really getting scared. So everybody crowds to their lifeboat station. There isn't a lot of panic, but people are getting really worried. And you have to understand that we're in the Gulf of Alaska, so if anyone fell over or got pushed into the sea, they die rather quickly because of the conditions of the cold water. Just like the initial survivors of the Titanic died of the cold water amid the icebergs. So we're there. Mallory and I are go up to lifeboat number 2, which is on the bow of the ship, and we're there only for maybe 10 minutes or so. And the fire, which has never been put out, finally busts through the windows in the dining room and the ship's lounge. It takes a big gulp of oxygen, and all of a sudden there are flames shooting 20 feet into the air. Now people are really getting panicked. And the captain appears on the bridge, and he urges everyone to stay calm. This is going to start lowering the lifeboats, and remarkably, people stay pretty calm. I asked Mallory to see what the lifeboat says its capacity is, and she looks and she says, it says 45, Dad. And I count at least 75, 80 people waiting for our lifeboat. So they really screwed up. Anyway, we all managed to wedge into this lifeboat. By some miracle, all 7 lifeboats are lowered without loss of life, even though the crew seems really poorly prepared. This was a relatively new cruise ship, like the Titanic, unsinkable and all that. Yeah, right. So we're in this lifeboat. It gets lowered. It's now still the middle of the night now. It's 2, 3 in the morning. And actually being crowded together is good because no one has warm clothes on, so it helps keep us warm. And the sea at that moment is calm. However, they had distributed seasick pills at dinner that night because Typhoon Vernon is heading for us, and we're going to be in the middle of a bad storm the next day. Well, now we are the next day, and instead of being in a big cruise ship, we're in little teeny lifeboats. So we're cast loose from the burning ship, and we drift apart from the other lifeboats, and we're in lifeboat number 2, and we're 140 miles off the coast, so the rescue is going to be difficult, but it's a massive process, and the Coast Guard does a fabulous job, along with the Canadian Air Force and some other organizations. And they start flying helicopters from the coast, and the helicopters would come over a lifeboat, and they would lower a steel chair, and one person at a time would get into that steel chair and get winched up into the helicopter, and the helicopter would then fly off to the deck of an oil tanker, which had answered the SOS coming near us, and the oil tanker couldn't pick us up individually in lifeboats because it was just too big. But the helicopters were then transferring people to the deck of the oil tanker and saving them that way. So one by one, the problem is that the Typhoon Vernon is finally hitting us. So the sea is no longer calm. It's beginning to rock and roll. So it becomes a race against time. The helicopters go as fast as they can, taking 7 or 8 people at a time over to the tanker. So I see my daughter, Mallory, rescued at about noon the next day. And a helicopter comes over a few more times, and until finally there's only 8 of us left, eight men in lifeboat number 2. is kind of funny, I guess, because when that helicopter came over the first time, the question arose, well, who gets into it first? Well, all we knew was all the grade B movies we'd all seen, and of course everybody knows women and children first. So the women and children went first, even though females are better able to stand the cold than males, I understand. In any case, there's 8 men left. Typhoon's getting worse and worse. We're all completely seasick, but more to the point, we're getting hypothermic. And I climbed a lot of mountains up until then. I know what hypothermia is, and I know how it works. You get really, really cold, but then you get so cold you start getting warm again, and you drift off into sleep, but it's a sleep you don't wake up from. So hypothermia is a real problem. 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, the storm is getting worse and worse. The seas are rising. They eventually get to 30 feet, which is, that's like up and down a 6-story building. And it's like in this tiny cockle shell of a lifeboat. And we're bailing like crazy. We're cold. We're dying of hypothermia. But the key thing is, our only chance now is for a Coast Guard cutter, a small boat, to find us, because it's so rough now that the helicopters can't fly through the storm. It's suicidal. So the helicopters disappear, and there's 8 of us left in the lifeboat. Our only hope is the Coast Guard cutter finding us. It's going to be really difficult, even in daylight, because now the visibility is down to maybe 100 yards or so, and storms coming on, huge waves. And the Coast Guard cutter is searching frantically for us. And the thing is, that's daylight. Well, it's going to be dark in about an hour at about 5 p.m. maybe. It's going to be dark in an hour. And once it gets dark, we're dead. The Coast Guard cutter can never find us. We have no flares, no lights, no radio, nothing.
Mm-hmm.
No warm clothes. So once it's dark, we're basically dead. I figure we'll live 3 or 4 more hours, and then in the morning, if we're not thrown out of the lifeboat, they'll just see our corpses there. So, I'm led to. I'm not a religious person then or now, but I was led to some kind of what I thought was a prayer, and I'd survived a violent death, as I said earlier, a dozen times, and I figured up until then that this was going to be yet another close call. But now the odds looked like they were like disappearing. I mean, it's like 1 in 1,000, 1 in them, I don't know what, but the Coast Guard cutter finding us in that storm, the odds were just infinitesimally small. So I look up into that storm and I start trying to pray. Well, it wasn't a prayer because, it was more an angry bleat, like saying, look, God, Here, I finally turned my life around. I was a self-absorbed young person, living for adrenaline. And then I finally figured out that I wanted to do good in the world, to be of service. And I helped end apartheid and a lot of other good stuff at the United Nations. And now you're wiping me out. That makes no sense at all. I mean, I went to a Jesuit high school, for God's sake. I know about order in the universe, sugar crystals and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's stupid to wipe me out now because I got maybe 50 more years to live just to do what I thought was your work, being of service, helping people solve problems. And I get this message back. The other 7 guys didn't hear a damn thing, I'm sure. But I get a message back from whatever it is out there, the higher than thou. And the message is real clear. It says, stop bullshitting me. You're lecturing on a cruise ship because you got panicked over money. And if you get out of this, you'll lecture on another cruise ship. It's great you helped end apartheid, but you haven't got the guts to live a full life of service. And you got to think about that, because if you really declare that you want your life to be of service, well, maybe you'll get rescued. Who knows? But if you're just gonna can lecture on more cruise ships, hell, you might as well die out here, because the rest of your life won't be worth living.
Yeah.
You know what your life is about. It's about a life of service. And if you back away from this now, you might as well be dead. Whew, wow. Slap across the face. So I look up into this wild storm. And I'm totally beaten. I know I'm dying of hypothermia. I'm seasick as a dog. I look into the storm, and my famous ego is deflated. And I look into the storm and I just say, okay, you got it. I agree. And I know this sounds like another grade B movie, but in that instant, an instant of submission, this Coast Guard cutter, the Boutwell, comes crashing through this wild storm. It was so bang on, it would have cut us in two had the lookout not seen us. So that's what happened. And so the Boutwell comes near us, and they put frogmen jump into the lifeboat, and we get rescued. And I never looked back after that. I kept my promise, went back to New York, and joined. Within a year, I'd found the perfect place for me to be that service, and it was the Giraffe Heroes Project, which we can talk about later. I hope we do. Started by a writer and editor in New York City named Dan Medlock. And it's all about finding people and creating role models for service, courageous service. So that's the story of the lifeboat. And it was obviously a life-changing experience. It was a slap across the head, across the face, and a put up or shut up. And, Peter got off the pot, and I made that decision, and I never looked back.
Yeah. Lessons and strategies or potential catastrophic events are huge. And, one of those is not giving up, and you change your life because you got in your case, 13th chance, not a second chance. You've had many chances, and you're doing best. And thank you for sharing that. Let's jump in the Giraffe. We've got about 10 minutes here. Giraffe Heroes Project. What's that about? What's your mission with that?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I want to emphasize again that I didn't start it. Ann Medlock started it. She was a writer and editor in New York City. And she was sort of fed up with the fact that the conventional news sources were all about gloom and doom.
Yeah.
If it bleeds, it leads. And the newspapers were full of what was going on wrong, but no one was telling the stories of what was going right. No one was telling the stories of heroes, people really doing good things in the world, so as to be role models for the rest of us to do good things on our own. Nobody was telling those stories. So Anne decides to start her own news service to compete with ABC and CBS, start telling the stories of heroes. And she started with out from her apartment in New York City, looking for real heroes in New York City and elsewhere, and then interviewing these heroes and taking their interview tape and melding it with what do you call it? A voiceover by a movie star or a stage star, and creating 3-minute recordings and putting them on vinyl records. Some of your I suspect some of our viewers, listeners won't even know what a vinyl
No.
record is. You put it on a turntable, it goes round and round, and sound comes out.
There you go. Yeah.
He started doing this, recording stories of Giraffe Heroes. And then sending them out to tiny radio stations, because big radio stations had never heard of her, so they didn't play it. So it was small radio stations all over the country, and it caught on. It caught on, and within a couple of years, there was a story on her in the New York Times, and the Giraffe Project continued to grow. In the beginning, I got to admit, I was skeptical of the Giraffe Project because I thought I wanted to change the world, all right. But I thought I could change it just through my wonderful speeches. Oh boy, I always had a good gift of gab, persuasive on the stump, except that nobody gave a you know what, and nobody was coming to my lectures, and I wasn't changing anything. And then I met Anne, and she was beautiful, and I fell in love with her, and everything she was doing became a lot more important to me. So I looked hard at what she was doing. She was doing what people had done for 10,000 years. That is to say, she was a storyteller. It's just like Neanderthals around their campfires told the stories of heroes in order to inspire heroism in the Neanderthal community. And then, of course, in the Middle Ages, the troubadours doing the same thing, telling the stories of Sir Lancelot or whatever, heroes to inspire other people to be heroic. She was doing the same thing. She was the troubadour of our times, and it was immensely powerful. And I joined her, and we've been running it ever since 1982, running it together. And so it's like a lot of years, 40 some years. And we're doing essentially what Anne started doing 42 years ago. We're finding people. Now we found almost 2,000 over all those 40 years. We told their stories in the beginning, as I said, or vinyl disc. Now, of course, we use the latest in social media to tell the stories. And we get plenty of evidence that storytelling, just as it has since the Neanderthals, is having its effect. We've inspired all kinds of people, at least they tell us so. And not only that, we help them because by bringing attention to heroes, we gain support for them. In some cases, like when we tell the story of a whistleblower, someone whose life might be endangered by their heroic actions, our telling the story offers a kind of protection. So we're doing that work. For 30 years, we've been creating programs for schools curricula, teaching kids to become compassionate, courageous human beings as they grow up. And we now are a far-flung worldwide organization. We have affiliates in 7 other countries doing the same thing in their countries. Your readers might want to know, I would say, not your readers, your listeners, your viewers.
All the same.
Whatever, whoever's listening to this, they can go on to giraffe.org, and at the top of the nav bar, it says there's a way to look at this database of 2,000 stories, and each is more inspiring than the one before, so they can see what I'm talking about. But, just very briefly, this in the last week or so, the 2 stories that stuck in my mind. A young woman in Western Uganda, for example, taking on the whole tribal infrastructure in rural Africa, where women's lives are at risk. They have no rights at all in traditional tribal societies, and in fact, some of them are subject to terrible physical mutilation. Some of your readers may know it's awful stuff. Anyway, she's fighting that at great risk to her life because the tribal chiefs want to kill her. That was one. And back in this country, there's a classic whistleblower in the Veterans Administration who learned of a corrupt practice going on in the VA, and he blew the whistle on it, and he got fired because his bosses didn't want it to be made public. Well, he blew the whistle and started a whole campaign to eliminate that corrupt practice that was harming veterans. And there's 2,000 more stories like that, all over the world, and we just make these people as famous as we can. We tell their stories. We're the troubadours of our time.
True stories, good stories. I like that.
And I've written 5 books now on sticking your neck out, on leadership, on service. on the search for meaning. And Ann and I both speak a lot. We do podcasts, getting the word out, and this is
Yeah.
what our lives are about.
Yeah, we're coming close to the end here. Why did you call it Giraffe Heroes? Where's the giraffe come into this play?
Oh, come on. Giraffes have long necks, right? And
There. Oh, I get it
stick
now.
you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should have said that. Ooh.
No, that's okay. No, it gave me a question to
No,
ask you.
no, it's okay.
Yeah.
We're looking for people. Our bumper sticker is we move people to stick their necks out for the common good. So the giraffe was the natural symbol
Yeah.
for what we're
Great.
doing, a meme for what we're doing. The long neck giraffe sticking your neck out in English anyway means to take a risk. So yeah, it came
Yeah.
from that.
You've learned a lot. What's one lesson before we end here that you want to give the audience if you learned over these years, all these events that have happened to you? What's one lesson you give them?
Well, I'll tell you, having started off the wrong way for a lot of years, one adventure after the other, but they were all very self-serving, and then finally figuring out what life was about. And the one lesson in figuring out what life was about, the one lesson that I keep harping on in everything that I do publicly, whether it's podcasts or book writing or whatever, is that every single one of us, there's nothing more important in our lives that our life become meaningful. That is to say, we look at the mirror in the morning and what looks back at us, we want that to be meaningful. We want that to make a difference. We don't want to think we're just on the planet to take up space, that our lives can actually mean something. We all want that. As a young man, I thought the meaning in my life came from physical adventure. A whole lot of other people, and we all know them, bless them, think, at least for a time, that meaning comes from amassing money or power. Well, I think a lot of times, sooner or later, you learn that it doesn't have a lot of staying power. And I tell people, look, everything is the most important thing in your life or my life is finding meaning. In my experience now, 82 years old, the most stable, the most long-lasting form of finding meaning I've ever discovered is being of service, is giving back, is finding a public problem and then using whatever resources and skills you've got to help solve it. Either start an organization on your own or join another organization, but get off your rear end and do something, stick your neck out, and you'll feel a whole lot better and you'll make the world a lot better.
Amen.
So
I love that.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, come to the end here. I want to ask you a question, kind of a fun question. So you've got a reservation at a restaurant. You've probably been in many restaurants, table of 4. You're going to sit in one of the chairs. In the other 3 seats, who would you invite, dead or alive? And why would you invite them? And what food would you order?
Who would I invite? Well, I would invite the people that have really become my heroes. In the beginning, when I was 22, it was John Wayne. Now it's more like Martin Luther King, Desmond Tutu, Abraham Lincoln, people that clearly stuck their necks out. I want to know more from them. Were you ever scared? Abraham Lincoln, Abe, were you ever scared? Did you ever think it wouldn't work? Did you ever think like the South would win the Civil War? Yeah, whatever. I mean, and Nelson Mandela, hell, you were in prison for 22 years. What made you think you could end apartheid in South Africa, for God's sake? I want to know. I want to know what kept you going. Oh, and what I would order. Gee whiz, I would order. I'm sorry for your vegetarian listeners, but I would order a buffalo ribeye steak.
Ooh, well, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's the best meal I ever had. A restaurant down in southern Utah just last summer. Yeah, buffalo ribeye steak, and I don't know if these other gents are on the table. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't mention any women. That's not right. One of those
Give us
4
one woman.
My wife. She's my
There you
hero.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Ann Medlock. She's unstoppable, and she has more courage than all the rest of us put together.
Amen. I love that. So how can people learn more about the Giraffe Heroes Project? How can they connect with you or connect on the website? Is that the best way?
Yes, it is. The website's pretty good. We keep it up. It's simple enough, giraffe.org. If you want to know more about my checkered past, it's at johngraham.org, my name plus org. And if I can, I want to plug my book, because that's got more of my stories. It's a memoir. It's the latest book is called Quest, Quest, Risk, Adventure, and the Search for Meaning. And get it from your bookstore or Amazon. Yeah, that'll get people going. And please, my email's all over this at graham@giraffe.org. I'm delighted to talk to people. They can reach me on LinkedIn. They can reach me on email. And I greatly enjoy like doing Zoom calls, for example. My whole life is about spreading this word, and I'm shameless about it. I'll take any means that works, from podcast to books to radio shows to whatever. I used to do a lot of in public speaking, but COVID pretty much shut that down. But now I don't have to, because podcasts are like this one, for example. I reach a whole lot more people than I can by going from one city to another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You stay right at home in that beautiful city and island that you're in. Hey, John, thank you again. You're a blessing. Hey, audience, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Here's why. Because you get this link. If you know a hero out there that you want to share what John's doing and what Ann's doing, his wife, share this link and be able to understand and have the passion that John has and that incredible story he told us. So go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have a comment for this show, put it on the YouTube channel as well. If it's a comment for John or Ann, I'll get that out to him as well. And with that being said, me and John want to thank you all so much for watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.